Hello, this is the Aussie Arrowhead. I'm going to try something different with this video. I want to do something a little bit more off the cuff. I want to just talk about my experience with Buddhism and what sort of things I am thinking and feeling and experiencing as I live this path. And today I'm filled with quite a lot of joy, quite a lot of gratitude. And today I visited a Buddhist temple for the first time. So that might be a surprise to some of you if you've been following my videos, but yes, I've never actually set foot in a Buddhist temple until today. I live here in Perth, Western Australia, and we've got a few lovely temples around. And today I went to it was described as a tea gathering. And I thought, yeah, I'll come along to this. I've been trying to do more social things outside of the house, and I've wanted to engage more with Buddhism, which is part of why I've set up this YouTube channel. And yeah, so I went along today, and it was absolutely lovely. I had a great time. I expected it to be pretty much how it was. I managed to speak to one of the venerable monks there. We had a brief conversation. I just introduced myself, and we had a chat about Buddhism and following the path and sort of how to be a Buddhist and all of this. And I think I started it off by, I guess, when you feel you know something about a topic, you kind of regurgitate a lot of knowledge. And so the monk was very gracious and listened to me, and I sort of explained a few things as I understood them through this project here. And this project is, I've set up this channel basically to learn about Buddhism. I've created it at risk of embarrassing myself because there's a lot I don't know. And while I have had a strong belief in Buddhism as a way of relieving human suffering for a long time, a lot of the basic concepts, a lot of the sort of scholarly stuff, but even just the practice and all that, I don't know a lot about it. And yeah, so I've set up this YouTube channel. I'm sort of doing deep dives into different subjects. And all it is me trying to sort of piece together a picture. I'm trying to piece together sort of an understanding of what this is. I'm autistic, and I guess I've needed a special interest for a little while, something that I can really sort of sink my teeth into. I also believe I have ADHD, and sort of those things together have made it very difficult to focus on things. And I like writing. I have a talent as a writer, but I've struggled to develop that. And I've found that I've managed to get myself reading, get myself doing some research, get myself sort of synthesizing bits and pieces of all of these wonderful resources we've got online and the books that I have access to. And yeah, I found that I'm learning a lot from this, and I'm achieving my goals. I feel that I am not only learning to speak better and sort of develop my knowledge of a topic, if it wasn't Buddhism, I would have picked something else. I'm very interested in the world, and I've always admired people who have spent so much time sort of combing through research and thinking about certain topics, whether it is history or whether it is mathematics, that they have a sort of expert level of knowledge. And I have learned that when you have an expert level of knowledge, as you get sort of more advanced, it's not just an accumulation of facts. It's more, you start entering the territory of disputes about the fundamentals of the field and how it functions and how it should be practiced and all this. And that sort of exploded my mind when I learned that. I have a background in philosophy. I've studied a fair bit of philosophy throughout my life, academically and sort of on my own. I guess the way I arrived at Buddhism is I read a book. It was called 12 Theories of Human Nature. I can't remember the name of the author, but I read this for a university undergraduate class, and in it detailed, and I think it's been published a few times, there's 10 theories of human nature, 11, 12, depending on, sort of what they felt they wanted to include for the next edition. But he talked all about different ways of understanding the world and what humans are. And if we talk about human nature, and we do a survey of all the sort of great religions out there, all the great philosophers, there is a panoply of different views on this. And this book covered everything from Confucius to, I think, Lao Tse was in there. I think it definitely had Christianity, Islam, and it also went into some, I think, was it 20th century philosophy, like existentialism. They even talked about Marxism, because Marxism has a very kind of strong theory about human nature in alienation and capitalism and all that. But it was the chapter on Buddhism that really spoke to me. It was such a lovely description. It went over the Four Noble Truths, and just the idea that I kind of got this picture, and the way I sort of envisioned it at the time, that they're talking about dukkha, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, because one of the risks of running this YouTube channel is I'm pronouncing words that I've only ever read. Some of them I don't even consider looking up the pronunciation of. So I've made quite a lot of videos already, and in nearly all of them I've been pronouncing the word Dharma as Dhamma, and this is incorrect. I can't find any evidence that anyone pronounces it like this. So I only realised this about an hour ago, and I was like, it's all part of my journey. I'm going to leave it up there. If other people sort of access my videos and get some use out of them, but find my use of that term Dhamma or Adama, it should be Dharma or Adama, a little off-putting, then that's why. I apologise. I'm sort of trying to exercise some cultural sensitivity here. I want to know how to pronounce things. I haven't learned Chinese. I haven't learned Sanskrit. I haven't learned Pali. But I'm sort of diverging a bit here. But there was this lovely chapter on Buddhism in this book. the 12 theories of human nature. And it really spoke to me, this idea of dukkha, as this kind of, I think it described it as like a flame. It described it as like a flame, and then it sort of described that what is generating this flame is cravings or tanha. And you can extinguish it, you can blow it out, and then dukkha is gone. So that extinguishing, that craving, the first three of the Four Noble Truths concern that. And then I learned the way you do that extinguishing or blowing out, and I think he did describe it in this book that way. I have to read those chapters again. I may even do a video on it for my channel, possibly after I finish what the Buddha taught, which is quite a long project. I may only do a chapter at a time instead of committing to a whole book, because there's such a great number of Buddhist texts out there I would like to read and understand. So, and yeah, this blowing out comes through practicing the Eightfold Path, and from there I learned about the path. I looked at the picture of the wheel and all of the spokes sort of sticking out from it, and yeah, I still don't know if I can recount these from memory, but we've got right view, right speech, right bodily conduct, right livelihood, right effort. That's 5 of them. I'm sure there are others. No, there definitely are. There's at least 3 more that I haven't talked about. But I've got to say that I haven't referred to that list too much. I found Buddhism has a wealth of lists that are really helpful to me. And when I talk about helpful, if I consider the words of the Vietnamese Buddhist monk and writer Thich Nhat Hanh, he talks about sort of these formations in our mind. What happens is over time we get these knots in our mind, which they're kind of like mental formations. They're thoughts that we are particularly stuck on that are causing us a lot of grief, a lot of pain. There's these knots in our mind, and the idea is that through practicing mindfulness and skillful thinking, we can unknot those knots. We can unknot them so they're no longer a knot that is stuck in our mind. We want to loosen them and free them. And I find these Buddhist lists are fantastic for this. And nearly all of them come from a sort of understanding that if we're talking about sort of the things that ail us, it reduces down to, and this is only one way of thinking about it, the 3 poisons, right? So the 3 poisons are greed, fear, and delusion. And there's Sanskrit, Pali words for these. But greed, fear, and delusion. If I can see where those are working in my mind when I'm considering a problem that I'm having, perhaps I am having romantic difficulties, perhaps I'm having work challenges. It could be anything that's causing me stress or distress. I find if I think in terms of what are the sort of causes, what are the sort of root things happening here? So look, greed, fear, delusion, you can look at it like that. But also there's the 5 hindrances, and I find these way more useful. I was sort of researching this the other day, and there was a suggestion made that this is more of a sort of practical manifestation of the three poisons. I don't know how this is regarded, or sort of what weight is given to these things in, the Buddhist canons. But the five hindrances, if we think, I find these much more helpful. We've got ill will, we've got pleasure seeking, we've got doubt, we've got anxiety and worry, and we've got sloth and torpor. And if I'm looking at a problem I'm having and I just sort of get it out, I write it down in a book, and I write it as neutrally and dispassionately as I can. Or sometimes I write the most sort of emotionally charged version that's in my head. Either way, I'm getting it out on the page, and then I'm like, all right, so this is the problem. But so we think about delusion. Are we seeing this clearly? Right? Do we have all the information? Is there something I'm missing in my perspective? One of the very first foundational things for me is that, most things as they meet us, most things that we experience are just an impression. It's just an impression. It's an initial impression. There's often a lot of emotions loaded in it. And this, we can't put too much sort of trust in this, that this is the truth. And it is a good idea generally to just sort of reject it altogether and say, no, I don't assent to that. I don't think that's true. I'm going to just give this some time. I'm going to let my emotions simmer down. I'm going to do whatever I need to sort of move to the next step. So it's that idea that there's a sort of delusion working on us here, that we want to see what's true. We want to know what's true. We want to know what's bending our perceptions here. Sometimes it is a state of anger. But if you look at the other two poisons, you've got fear and greed. Fear is this is something that just completely scrambles our minds, and it is very difficult to live and make decisions when we're in a constant state of fear. So what can we do to ease fear within us? Sometimes it's this unknotting of a problem, and using these concepts to try and pick apart its logic and sort of see things differently. You might consider this a form of CBT. Is it cognitive behavioural therapy? I think I've got the right acronym there. But the idea is that you sort of reframe your thoughts and look at it differently. And some people see this as a kind of cope. This is just we're putting lipstick on a pig, for example, to use it. That is a really horrible phrase, I think. But we're dressing up something that some people might consider as objectively bad. But I don't think it's quite that at all. I think there's good and bad in all things. And it is very difficult for that reason to sort of tell good from evil sometimes. And I could give practical, concrete examples of this, but everybody experiences this differently, I think. And it's just certain ways of life, they appeal to me sometimes, but as I sort of live it out, I realise there is a downside. There is maybe something unethical about this, or maybe, I don't know. So I've gotten a little bit off track here, but we've got the three poisons, trying to apply those to these problems that we are unknotting in our minds. We've got the five hindrances, which I find even more useful. ill will, pleasure seeking, doubt, sloth and torpor, anxiety and worry. And for me, I just think, all right, how are any of those 5 things, or maybe I'll pick 2 of them, doubt, sloth and torpor. And then I'll go, all right, what aspects of those hindrances are part of this problem? Right? And it gives me a kind of key to start thinking about it. I start thinking about it. And through that, I can transform my emotions into something different. It's that. And if we look at and there's another list, sort of the contrast or the opposites of the 3 poisons. What are they? Wisdom, loving kindness, and there's a third one. It'll come to me, but the list I think is most important here is the 7 factors of awakening. I really like this list. I found just going through this and trying to just transform what I'm thinking into this kind of way of thinking has helped me immensely. So the 7 factors of awakening are mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, and I think it's tranquility, focus, or concentration, and equanimity. So those 6 things. And what this is the difference between, if we're talking about the 3 poisons and the 5 hindrances, and we're talking about the 3 wholesome roots and the 7 factors of awakening. These are the difference between a wholesome state and an unwholesome state. And, well, so I think I should have done that in a way where sort of it was respective, but for what I mean by that is the 3 poisons, the 5 hindrances, those are the unwholesome state of being, the 3 wholesome roots and the 7 factors of awakening, these are the wholesome state of being. So we got this unwholesome and we got this wholesome state of being. And if we look at the spokes of our wheel again, the Dhamma wheel, if you will, and there I go, I said it again, Dhamma. I will try to practice saying Dharma from now on. And so the internet isn't particularly forgiving with this sort of thing, but I think people will understand, or at least the ones that I hope to reach with my words will consider everything else I say other than my pronunciation flubs. So, and it's all part of the fun, I think. And so that's a little bit of my interest in Buddhism. And I don't want to get too into the deep, dark stuff of my life. I don't want to get too personal for a sort of general anonymous audience. But I will say that I've come from a life that is... I've known a lot of chaos in my life. I've dealt with a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. I've had mental health issues, and I've found one of the most effective things for me was studying Buddhism and trying to put those lessons into practice. So for me, I would say it has saved my life. That is how strongly I feel it has protected me. And as I was talking to a Buddhist monk today at the temple, I had brought this to him, and he mentioned the 3 jewels. He said that you need to retreat. And what we do as practitioners is we retreat into the Buddha, into the Dharma, and into the Sangha. And up until this point, I realised that I didn't have a Sangha. And there's a sort of, I guess there's a division in this term. Some people think it strictly means monastic communities. The temple I went to today, it sort of indicates that it means everybody who goes to the temple and practices together, whether you are a monk or a lay person. But Sangha community, you need people who are cultivating the same things in your heart to make that so much more powerful. And I've learned, one of the most beautiful things I've learned in Buddhism, studying Theravada, and then I think I read the Lotus Sutra, the sort of key Mahayana text, and in that it describes sort of the Mahayana project, which is it's more expansive than the Theravada one, although there's some debate on this. But there's this idea that in Theravada, the ultimate attainment is to become an arhat or an arahant, and this is someone who has liberated their mind, they have great control over their mind, they have freed themselves from mental suffering. In Mahayana, that's only one step on the path to enlightenment. There's this whole other dimension which is about bringing out, it is about our Buddha nature and bringing it out in the rest of the world. We want to, and how shall I put this? I think it's called Ekhyana. If correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, it's this idea that we want not only to liberate ourselves, from personal suffering, but to work for the emancipation of all living beings. We want to bring out the Buddha nature in other people, and we want to work towards easing the suffering of all living beings. And this is the difference between an arhat or arahant and a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva does that work. So I found this really powerful. And it got me thinking, okay, so look, up until this point, I have been concerned with a sort of, how should we say, a sort of personal situation where I wanted to ease the troubles in my life. And I found that in Buddhism and so much more. And it's this idea that you sort of live this sort of, this individual path of mindfulness, and you cultivate this and you make, you do something beautiful with your mind. You clear it of all mental defilements. You sort of bring out this beautiful, loving nature in yourself. And yeah, so one thing I've learned is that this sort of, in the Lotus Sutra, I think it's the Buddha makes this proclamation, and they've got all these religious leaders in a sort of gathering, and I think all of the arhats walk away because they feel like they've been devalued. They've been demoted to someone who's merely attained nirvana. They haven't attained this sort of this ekhyana, this this bodhisattvahood, and learning about Theravada Buddhism, it's still very socially engaged. It's still it talks about personal suffering, but the way to exit personal suffering definitely has a sort of social dimension and it has a an ethical dimension. So in this way, they're cousins. They're sort of slightly different goals. I think together they they're both quite beautiful. And yeah, it's this diversity I appreciate within Buddhism. I'm not sure that all of the schools or communities would get along if they were to talk to each other, but I think most schools uh, sort of agree on some basic fundamentals. The Four Noble Truths, sort of, I guess, the three jewels. We need to retreat into, the Buddha. We need to understand the Buddha's life, what he believed. We need to know the Dharma path, and we need a Sangha. We need people around us who are cultivating us to be our better selves. I went to the temple today, and what they were, the event they had on was a tea gathering, and this was a tea ceremony. They had this is, so I think the denomination here, they call themselves Humanistic Buddhism, which is just an engaged form of Buddhism that tries to get out and do charity work and other things. But it has roots in Chan Buddhism, I think, so Chinese Buddhism. And tea drinking, they explain this to me, the mindfulness, that tea, the temple uses tea gatherings to promote mindfulness. So it's more than just drinking tea and enjoying tea and, sampling different kinds of tea and seeing which ones you like best. It's about the ritual. There's this beautiful sort of system where, they boil the water and they try to purify every step so that when the tea reaches your cup, see, they wash the leaves, they wash the pot that it's boiled in. They separate the liquid from the leaves into a separate jug so that the leaves do not become bitter, and they filter it all. And by the time they serve it in these miniature teacups, it's a very pure tasting tea. And just that ritual itself, setting that up, they had this beautiful log table with these logs we were all sitting on. And the lady explained it to me, and I told her sort of what I was feeling while I was doing this. And yeah, she was serving me lots of tea. I was drinking, and we were just talking about Buddhism and life. I sort of brought up something I've learned from Thich Nhat Hanh, which is this. He calls it into being. Okay, so he calls it into being. It's I think it's also known as dependent origination, and there's other terms for it. But it's this idea that when you sit down, and it's not just for a meal, but when you sit down for a meal, you consider all the things it took for that food, or in this case, the tea set in front of you, to sort of arrive, on your plate, on your table, and you think about the farmers who grew the vegetables, how long it took to till the field, how long it took to grow the vegetables, the rain, the sunshine, all of that sort of goes into the production of, I don't know, a vegetable like a cucumber, or in this case, tea leaves. All of that is part of the story of how this got to you. And you think of the clouds up in the sky, and how the rain falls on the field, and then the vegetables grow, that sort of thing. So it's this idea, and you can think of this of anything. I think Thich Nhat Hanh used an example of a piece of paper. he is writing on in one of his books, and how, this was a tree that was growing, and, the sunshine sort of helped the tree grow. It ate nutrients out of the ground. Then there was the efforts of the logger and the paper mill and all that sort of. If you do this sort of meditation, I think it's really interesting. It sort of connects me to the sort of grander picture of things. I feel I'm part of a universal whole here. These are things that, really, they really position us within this sort of, these systems of nature, these systems of the universe, and we are a part of it all. We are not separate. And this is sort of getting into this disillusion of the self in Buddhism, because if you keep following that line of thinking, we are not separate from the world out there. It's not just us and all of the objects in the world out there. Maybe it is that, but no, there's this sort of grander picture. And it's trying to, I think, just even through the act of drinking tea, or setting up a sort of station where you can create tea, and going through all the sort of rituals and methods of this. It's just, it's fascinating stuff. It connects you to history, and just the act. Even just, these are very small portions in these miniature cups, and it forces you to just slow down and sip very mindfully. And I guess what they were trying to communicate to me today was that we've got this message of the Buddha. We're talking about, whether it's the arhatship, I don't know if it's arhatship, whether it's being an arhat or an arahant, or it's being a bodhisattva and wanting to bring out the Buddha nature in everyone in the world. We're doing this through tea, and it's just there to give you a hint. To sort of, this ritual, this practice is there to sort of create the seeds of enlightenment, and I think that is beautiful. I love that. That was one of my favourite things about the temple today. Some of my other favourite things were when I went into the shrine. There were just so many Buddha statues around, and they had 3 massive ones, and they were very imposing figures, but also a lot of people came in, they prayed, they sort of got down on their hands and knees, and just like they would in a sort of Christian church. I sat on my knees and I just meditated, and I did take some time to look at the Buddhas, sort of the big massive statues, and I just felt, this space is here to cultivate mindfulness. It's here to sort of give us a sort of place where we can cultivate that Dharma, where we can sort of retreat into the Buddha's wisdom. And I thought about the four noble truths. I just went into life is suffering for a little bit, sort of dukkha, and some people translate that in different ways. It's sort of more like unsatisfactoriness, and I don't know if anyone actually does this. I read, someone pointed me to a message board post that sort of described it as, they reckon it's a translation, that it just means life is like a squeaky wheel on an ox cart. And if anyone knows where that comes from, I'd be interested to know. But I really liked that one. I think that's one of the other things that sort of drew me to this. I was like, all right, life is suffering, life is pain. There's that side of it where you are, and often I think a lot of young men approach this in a from a very angsty place, sort of informed by Western anxieties about this or that. And yeah, I think before I became interested in Buddhism, I was deep into existentialism. And yeah, it's just a sort of, I guess, this idea, it's all about this crisis of meaning. It's all about creating our own values in a world that no longer makes sense after World War Two. And was it World War Two? I can't remember if it was between wars or what. But yeah, but even there in existentialism, I observed in one of Jean-Paul Sartre's most famous essays, Existentialism is a Humanism, he's forced to defend his philosophy. His philosophy seems very self-centered and individualistic and concerned with personal suffering. Uh, and yeah, well, look, people are looking for, at this time, people were looking for answers after the war. Right, they wanted something that was going to help rebuild things. They wanted something that had an ethical dimension into it. Okay, it's great that we all live in this sort of state of meaninglessness, and we've got to sort of deal with that. But yeah, what can you offer us, Sart, which sort of gives us a way forward? And what he did was very interesting. I think, from what I remember, he sort of invoked something very similar to Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, or at least, yeah, there's this idea that we need to sort of, what was it? This sort of duty-bound ethics. I can't remember the details of that one, but the other more crucial thing here was that he sort of reached for political engagement. Right. So, yeah, he became a committed Marxist after that and did a lot of work in that sort of domain. Famously, it sort of caused a rift between him and Albert Camus when I think the information about the gulags in the USSR started coming out. But yeah, I sort of use that to illustrate that when you've got these sort of individualist pursuits, these individualized philosophies where we're sort of dealing with our own suffering, our own crisis of meaning, what is it that gets us from that to being a socially engaged human being in the world who is, yeah, sort of working from a moral compass, who is trying to sort of bring about in the world what is right? And I guess the answer is a sort of strong sense of social responsibility and ethics. And yeah, just like the difference between Theravada and Mahayana there, even though, I don't want to rag on Theravada too much, like painting it as a selfish philosophy or anything. It's nothing like that. But I feel the Mahayana tradition just nails it more when it comes to that. It's got this amazing, powerful imperative for people to promote freedom among all human beings. We've all got a Buddha nature. We want to awaken this in other people just by being the example we want to see in the world. And I think that's amazing. So, and I guess I'll just add with this temple, they are Chinese Buddhists. I'm largely unfamiliar with this world, but I do feel, quite an affinity for a lot of the things that the people I talked to today were saying. They all seemed very reasonable. Sort of, I guess that I have had I have actually gone to a Buddhist temple before, but uh, I believe I'd walked into a religious cult, and uh, and what do we call it? I think it's the True Buddha Association, right? There's a place very close to me here in Western Australia, here in Perth, and I went along to that as my first sort of taste of a Buddhist experience. Um, what I found is that they worship a living Buddha. A living Buddha. So there's a living guy. He makes proclamations. He live streams himself. Yeah, sort of a lot of their sort of practice is it sort of amounted to worship of this guy. And I looked him up, and yeah, sure enough, he had a sort of pretty big following, but I just felt uh, there was little room for disagreement with the people running that temple when I talked to them. It was either, no, what you're saying is wrong, there's a true way of doing this. So it's this idea of orthodoxy. Uh, the the monk I talked to today at the Chan temple, he was, well, it was a lady. I met a lady. She was wonderful. Uh, she was a venerable Buddhist there, and she was, yeah, she was very receptive to what I had to say. She sort of understood the sort of threads I was making, but she also put across her sort of understanding and her vision based on what she knows and understands based on all her years of training and practice with the church, the temple. Um, and yeah, that was much nicer. This other, the True Buddha Association, I think yeah, they didn't like my questioning, and I wasn't into that. I want a sort of open dialogue with people. I just felt, yeah, I sort of raised a few sort of, talked a little bit about my own personal knowledge, and it just felt they were steering me towards this sort of, I guess, this veneration of this living Buddha, and sort of that was that. You just followed him. I don't know if it's a money making exercise or what. Um, but some of them travelled very far from around the state to come to this place. That it just happened to be up the road from me. It's not very far away. But yeah, there were some true believers there. I only went once. I didn't go back. I just at that time uh, I was undergoing a personal crisis, which sort of had me sort of. I think that day I'd gone to a church service in the morning, and then I went to the Buddhist temple in the afternoon. So it was that sort of day. There was a chant. They did this. It was probably a 2 hour long sort of chanting ritual, and I liked that. But and I had a nice meal with them all, and we were all polite and fine. But just I felt doctrinal sort of, uh, I guess, orthodoxy coming from them, and yeah, I wasn't super keen on that. But yeah, I've talked for quite a while now. Uh, I guess I'm gonna do some rambles like this every so often. That actually felt really good. That felt really natural to me just talking about that. So yeah, I'd like to come back to this and just talk. Um, but I want to keep developing, uh, well, developing my practice, but also developing my channel. And uh, yeah, so I think so far I've done these research streams, which I think have been quite useful, but useful to me. I don't know about anyone else who has watched them. But yeah, it's just me sort of trying to Google things in real time and sort of piece together some understanding of that topic, and I'm getting something out of that. It's sort of, I find even if it's a very specific topic, like for example, I looked up the Abhidhamma, and yeah, from that I learned a fair bit about the sort of scholarly side of Buddhism. You know, you got the sutras and the Abhidhamma. It's Abhidhamma. It's probably Abhidharma. So I've got to undo that habit. It's yeah, I've been saying that a lot, and I want to pronounce it right. So forgive me if I have sinned by saying the word Dhamma instead of Dharma. But yeah, I think I might leave it there. There's a lot that I could talk about, but I'm going to save it for other videos. And yeah, I want to use this just to sort of raise sort of personal sort of issues and, well, issues. I just want to talk a bit more sort of off the cuff and more about myself and how Buddhism is developing in me. And if anyone wants to sort of chime in or sort of get in touch on social media or anything, I'd be willing to do that. I might put my socials up, but I also might not. I don't know if there's a messaging feature on here. Just yeah, you can leave comments on my videos. Sort of, I don't have a Twitter or anything. I do have a Facebook. I might set up an Aussie Arrowhant page on there. But yeah. Anyway, peace out.